Hello explorers and welcome to another video. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about custom elements and web components. So web components is a new feature that's implemented in Chrome, Opera, Safari, and has some support in Internet Explorer and Firefox. But still you need to do a lot of polyfill to get all the different functionalities in the different browsers. So if you want the full functionality in Internet Explorer and Firefox, you need to add a web components JS so you can fill up the functionality that is missing in your installation. So let's start up with creating a small little web components site here. It's pretty empty. We will create some styling here, just a simple style. Let's say that we have H1s and we will color those red just to show, and then we have a simple H1 document header, and if we are typing it like this, we will get a red header. Nothing pretty exciting there, but this is a start. So now I want to create a custom component. So let's say that I create my component, and then we have to end this, my component. So what I've done now, I've created my own tag, and this tag is not known by the system and will not be rendered at all. The web page doesn't know anything about this. And if I type something in here, let's type some words, it will just come out like something inside of a block element. So it will not know what to do with this custom element because it's not, can keep that there. It's not defined anywhere, so it doesn't know what to do with this thing that we gave it here. So in order to create a custom element, I just need to create a script tag like this, and then I create a class for a class. Use the class define here, and my component, and it will extend something called an HTML element. And an HTML element is actually something used by the browser. So the HTML element is actually the exact class that is used to render all other elements. So a div tag is an HTML element, an H1 element tag is an HTML element, and so on. And if I create this class, and I also require to call super, because HTML element does a lot of definition inside of it when you call super, so it's important to call that. And then I just use the custom elements define, and here I need to give it a name as I used it. My tag name is my component and my component. So this will define my element, and if I reload here, nothing happens, but I have actually defined my first component and I have something in it. So now, as I created my component and the element is defined and it has some value, I need to add something in this spec which is the next components, and that's a shadow DOM. And a shadow DOM is something that will encapsulate some data inside of its own little document. So the rest of the document will not know about this shadow DOM. It's just something that you as a component creator will have access to and make changes to. And of course you can bridge and give access to some part of your component, but by standard it's something that it's encapsulated, and it's by design because you'd want to create custom elements that you want to use on other sites. So you want them to be contained, and to do that we will let a shadow DOM be equal to this attach shadow, and here we can give it a mode, and that mode could either be closed or opened, and the closed is it's actually contained and will not be able to change it, and if you have it open you can change it. So by attaching this shadow DOM, the text actually went away because now I have something that I render my information into called the shadow DOM. And to continue here, we will create something that is another thing defined in the specification for custom elements, and that's a template. So let's create a template and give it an ID, my component. So now I have a component that I call my template that I call my component. I will give it a style tag here as well, and just for fun we will create another HTML element h1 and give it a color of, let's say, purple, just so we have something different. And here we will create our h1 reference and call it component header, and close it off here. And in order to fetch this, I will use the standard document get element by ID, because at the moment it's in the same document, or it's in the top document. So here I can do component like that, and that will give us some data, some template. And then I need to take this template and fetch the content and clone node of that content deep. So we'll give it a true there, and that will be my template data, or HTML for instance. And then I take my shadow DOM and append node HTML. So this will append child. That should be the correct one. And there I have a component header which is purple. So the difference here is that it's inside of a component, so if I change the size it doesn't matter. I can change this up here and add a font size of 40, and that will not change anything about this component header. This component header is set to its specific font size and its specific color because it's in its own shadow DOM. And so that's how you encapsulate your shadow DOM into your component into its own shadow DOM. One thing to note is that if I, for instance, added a slot here, which is another function that you can use in an element, and that will actually add whatever you put into your document into your element. So you can put some data from your element, from your standard document or your other element that you want to use this element in, and put that inside and in a slot tag that will be appended. So if I have my outside of component header, so this is something that isn't defined in the template but is defined outside in the document. And then we will have some bleed through. So this will actually take some of the styling and JavaScript and so on from the document into the element. So that is something that you need to keep in mind if you want to use slots. Then we're going to talk about the last part of the spec, and that's imports. So we can add a link tag here, call it rel import, and we get an href. And here I will take my component HTML, so I can actually define a new HTML document. Let's say my component HTML. So now I've created my component HTML, and then I can move everything here into that other HTML. But now that I've copied this component into its own file, so it's linked in or imported in, then the template will not be in the document anymore. It will actually be inside of the script that I'm importing. So then I need to actually add some information here and say current script and owner document, to actually say that in this import I want to check the document for the currently imported script, and that's the document of that current script, so the owner document of that current script, in order to actually find my idea. Oh, I misspelled it out here, so let's change that. So now I have my component header again. And let's, just for fun, add an event handler here, connected callback, and that's one of the event handlers of the HTML element. And this connected callback is actually run every time you add an element to the page. So when it's stamped out on the page, it will be called. So if I in this take document get element by ID, and we will fetch some element here and then console log that element, just to see where things is. So let's say that this element is a component element, or a component header, we can call it that. And in this file we have this href is document header. So if we look for the document header in here, or the component header, we will see that the document header is present on the current document, because the document is the currently rendered page without the shadow DOMs. And if I ask for the element ID in the that is defined in the shadow DOM, it will not be present, it will not be found. So if you use jQuery, for instance, and are used to typing these easy, just get the component header like that, you will not find it in this document, because it's not in the document, it's in a shadow DOM. So in order to find it in my element, I can, for instance, say this shadow DOM, or shadow root, this shadow root, And if I run that, you'll see here that I have the document header, the null is the second row, and then component header is the last row. So it is defined in the shadow root of this document, the shadow document that I created here, but it's not defined in the standard document. So this is my component in ES6, and it's pretty easy to follow. But let's say that I want to take this and make it into an polymer element, because polymer takes some things that are quite hard or tricky to do and makes them quite easy to do. So to change this document, just to see the changes that will be made, I will need to do another link in here, and I have a Bower components polymer / polymer, and that you can install by running Bower install polymer, and then you will get that. And you might be required to have one of those up arrows 2.0.0.0, depending on if it's live at version 2 yet, or if you have if it's still in the window where it's an alpha release. So to get version 2, you might need to tell Bower to install version 2. So now I have the polymer library in here. So let's try to make this web component into a polymer component then. To start off, you need to encapsulate your component into one piece, and that is done in Polymer with the DOM module. And that's just so you can find the different pieces inside of your document, because inside of a DOM module, Polymer will look for a template and use that. So if you just say that I have a DOM module here, it has a specific name, that will help you with Polymer. So we'll end this DOM module down here, module like that. So that's the first part. The next part I will do is actually to change this HTML element to a polymer element. And then I don't actually need all the code inside of here. It's not required anymore. And I will create a getter. So it's a static getter that is called is. And this in turn will return the name of my component. And this is something that is just a standard defined function in Polymer. They have an is function that will connect everything. So the JavaScript or the Polymer element JavaScript or class will know which DOM module is connected to which, and so on. So it's just a connecting thing. And then down here, if we want, we can actually use this is static method just to make this code a little bit cleaner as well. And if we reload this, we should see our purple component header again. And just for completeness, just rename this to element and make it hot pink, just so we know that this is an element instead. And when we have done this, we can reuse this as many times as we like. And every time we do, we'll have a new context and a new space where we can work with different things. So for instance, if you make a checkbox, you can have 20 checkboxes, and every one of those checkboxes will have their own state and their own visual appeal and so on. So this is what I wanted to go through and talk about the basics around web components and how Polymer comes into play with web components, and how the encapsulation works, how templating works in web components, and HTML imports. One caveat to talk about here as well is that the HTML imports is actually a part of the specification that is not set in stone yet. They are still debating on how to do this and what's the right way to implement HTML imports. But if they actually come to a consensus and create this specification, it would be great, because I think the separation of adding your components in different files is so useful, and without the imports it's hard to actually have your templating with your JavaScript code. So I really hope that they will do that in the future. So I hope you learned something from this video. I hope you found it interesting. If you have any questions at all about web components or Polymer or anything like that, please hit me up in the comment section. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do so. I will talk more about web components or Java or machine learning. So I hope you follow, and I hope to see you in the next video.